I miss him most in the quiet moments, early mornings when the sun slices through the curtains and I'm left listening to the hollow echo of my own breath in an empty house. He's been away for 3 weeks now, working a project he says will help us get ahead. I tell him I understand, and maybe I do, but it doesn't soften the ache that sits in my chest like a stone. The phone calls are brief, filled with static and tired voices. I say, "I love you" at the end of every one, and he always says it back, but it sounds automatic, like punctuation. I keep myself busy. The garden needs watering, the dishes need washing, and the animals rely on me. Especially the donkey. He was a gift from my husband last year, meant to help with small tasks around the property. I laughed when he brought him home, named him foolishly, and told him it was sweet, though impractical. But lately, the donkey has become more than that. He listens. I know how absurd that sounds, but in the stillness of this place, where everything feels suspended in time, I talk to him the way I used to talk to my husband. I tell him about the weather, what I'm cooking, how the neighbors are gone for the weekend. He just stands there, silent and steady, his eyes calm, unjudging. That calmness is a comfort I can't describe. Sometimes I forget myself. I'll catch my fingers brushing his fur a little too gently, like one might touch a shoulder during a soft moment. I'll linger longer than I should after feeding him. There's a warmth in his presence that fills a space nothing else does. It's not about him being an animal or a pet. It's about what I've come to feel when I'm near him. Less alone. Less forgotten. There are moments, small ones, when I catch my reflection in the window and don't recognize myself. This woman, this quiet, yearning thing. I used to be full of noise and color. My husband and I used to laugh until our ribs hurt. Now, even his voice on the phone feels like it's coming from another life. I don't know when it started, this pull towards something so unlikely, so irrational. But the more I try to dismiss it, the more it seems to root itself inside me. I haven't told anyone, of course. What would I even say? That I feel more seen by a creature who can't speak than by the man I married? That in his absence, I've started confiding in someone or something that shouldn't matter at all? But it does. It matters too much. And that terrifies me. It began with small things, me noticing how I'd spend just a bit longer in the barn than necessary, how I'd look forward to those quiet minutes when the world wasn't asking anything of me. I started speaking more freely, openly, like I hadn't in months. I told him how I couldn't sleep well anymore, how silence stretched too wide between my husband and me even before he left. I spoke to the donkey the way I wished I could speak to a person who truly heard me. He didn't answer, of course, but somehow, that made it easier. No judgment, no quick fixes, no distractions. Just presence. Consistent and undemanding. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, important. Like someone or something depended on me emotionally, even if that was just a fantasy I'd built out of need. There was a time when my husband used to look at me like I was the whole world. That look faded long before his work trips began. I remember when he stopped reaching for my hand in bed, stopped noticing when I wore perfume, stopped asking how I really was. Everything became functional. We were partners, but not lovers. Supporters, but not companions. So I clung to this quiet bond one was forming, however strange it might have looked from the outside. One afternoon, I found myself resting my head against the donkey's neck, my eyes closing involuntarily, breathing sinking with a slow, deep rhythm. It wasn't physical in the way people might expect. It was something more internal, more intimate, a surrender. In that moment, I realized I was projecting, filling in the emotional spaces left behind by my husband with something that couldn't reject me. It felt safe. That night, I dreamed I wasn't alone in the barn. Someone was there, faceless, familiar, listening. He held me, wordless and warm, and I cried in the dream without understanding why. I woke up shaken, heart pounding, ashamed of how comforted I had felt. The dream lingered for days, making it harder to ignore how far I was drifting emotionally from my husband. I started lying to him, not outright, but in the small ways that count. I told him I was doing fine, that I was keeping busy, that I missed him, yes, but that everything was under control. The truth was, I didn't know what under control even meant anymore. I didn't tell him that I spent my days talking to an animal like he was human. I didn't say that I no longer felt connected to the life we were building. There's a strange sort of danger in loneliness. It makes you rewrite reality to survive. You start believing that your coping mechanisms are truths. That comfort, wherever it comes from, is valid as long as it keeps you from breaking. And maybe it is. But I was starting to feel like I was living a second life, quiet, hidden, and deeply intimate in ways I couldn't explain or justify. And I didn't want to stop. I knew I had crossed a line when I began waiting for him, not my husband, but the donkey. I'd wake up thinking about those few moments of peace beside him, where I felt more at ease than I ever did during phone calls or video chats with my husband. It wasn't just about loneliness anymore. It was about craving something I couldn't define, connection without expectation, intimacy without performance. A kind of closeness that didn't require me to explain myself. I started imagining conversations. He would ask how I was, and in my mind, I'd answer honestly. I pictured his eyes understanding, his stillness absorbing my every unspoken word. This wasn't a fantasy about an animal. It was about what he represented, a space where I could unravel without being judged. I didn't feel crazy. I felt starved. Starved for attention that didn't feel obligatory, for care that wasn't scheduled or distracted by deadlines. The emotional distance from my husband had been growing slowly, like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor is soaked. At first, I blamed the job, then the stress, then myself. But now, I had something else, something that made me feel again. And once you start feeling again, even in an unconventional way, the numbness of your real life becomes unbearable. One night, I had a dream so vivid it stayed with me like a secret I couldn't shake. In the dream, I stood in the barn, but it wasn't the donkey waiting for me. It was a man, faceless but familiar. He didn't speak. He simply looked at me the way I used to be looked at. There was no rush, no awkwardness, only stillness. I walked up to him, placed my hand on his chest, and felt warmth radiate like forgiveness. When I woke up, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I felt guilt, because I didn't. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just coping. It was replacement. I had replaced my husband emotionally. I had taken all the love, all the longing, and poured it into something that couldn't love me back, but never hurt me either. The simplicity of that felt like a relief. Every time I spoke to my husband after that, it felt like acting. Like I was reading from a script we both stopped believing in. He'd ask about my day, and I'd answer with safe stories. He'd say he missed me, and I'd echo the words like a child repeating a lesson. I didn't have the courage to tell him that my heart had wandered far from him, that I had found solace in a place he'd never understand. I wasn't delusional. I knew what I was doing wasn't normal. But normal hadn't saved me. Normal had left me empty, waiting for scraps of affection that came too late and too thin. So I clung to what gave me peace, even if it was silent, strange, and utterly mine. And in that silence, I felt more seen than I had in years. He came home without warning, 3 days earlier than planned. I heard his voice before I saw him, calling out from the porch like nothing had changed. I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do. I hugged him because I remembered how. I told him I missed him, though the words felt rehearsed. He looked tired, thinner maybe, but his hands still felt the same around my waist. Familiar, not thrilling. Known, not wanted. We sat across from each other that evening, sharing a meal in silence. He told me about delays, contracts, how the hotel food was awful. I nodded, asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments. He didn't notice anything wrong. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. Either way, the gap between us had widened into something unspoken. He tried to touch my leg under the table. I shifted without thinking, then smiled to soften the rejection. He went quiet after that. I didn't go to the barn the next morning. I stayed inside, pretending to be busy, pretending not to feel what I felt. It wasn't shame exactly, it was distance. Like the life I had been living while he was gone now had to be folded up and tucked away, hidden behind small talk and forced kisses. When he asked why I hadn't fed the donkey yet, I said I'd get to it later. But I didn't. Over the next few days, I tried to return to being a wife. I cooked his favorite meals, watched his shows, listened to him talk about things that used to matter to me. But it all felt thin, like wallpaper over a cracked wall. I realized how hard I had worked to convince myself that his return would fix everything, that being together would erase the distance. It didn't. It couldn't. The donkey stood at the fence every evening, waiting. I stopped going near him. I couldn't. The thought of being in that space again, of feeling the peace I'd once found there, now felt like a betrayal too far. But I missed it. Not him, not exactly, but what he represented. The quiet understanding, the absence of expectation, the feeling of being needed without conditions. One night, my husband reached for me in bed. I didn't pull away this time. I let him hold me, let him kiss me, let him believe. I closed my eyes and went still, and he whispered that he loved me. I said it back. I don't know if I meant it. Maybe I did. Maybe part of me still clings to what we were. But another part of me, the part that cried in a barn, the part that dreamed of being touched without being touched, remains unreachable. I never spoke of what happened while he was gone. I never will. Some things live quietly in the spaces between confessions. I live there now, in that space where longing blurred into betrayal and comfort cost more than I expected. I still love my husband in pieces, but some of those pieces are missing and I no longer know where I left them.